Welcome back to MMA Oddsbreaker Fight Breakdown Show. This one is for UFC 191. Johnson versus Dotson 2. Obviously, it's in September 5th, MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. Another huge card for the UFC. This one, of course, back in the hometown of Las Vegas. Is this whole card, top to bottom, matching up to what we've seen as of late, Nick, with the UFC?
It's a great card. I mean, as far as star power, for some reason, obviously a guy like Demetrius Johnson headlining, he deserves all the respect in the world, but he just doesn't have that pull that somebody like Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey has. So no, doesn't stack up to those events quite yet, but Demetrius Johnson definitely deserves all of our respect. He's one of the best fighters in MMA and has been for a while. So really looking forward to it.
We'll get to his fight here in a second because I want to talk about the co-main event first. But if Johnson finishes Dodson, does this move him up in the pound for pound rankings?
To me, he's really at the top of the list. I mean, I know that's a lot of people will can argue that, but right now I think he's just the most complete fighter there is in the sport. I mean, there's a lot of talent definitely in the UFC. All the title holders obviously are champions for a reason, but man, Mighty Mouse put everything together so well. So in my opinion, he's already there. But yes, if he finishes a guy like Dotson, which is considered probably one of his toughest challenges, maybe top two, three, yeah, that's impressive for sure.
Okay, well, we'll get back to them in just a second. Let's go ahead and talk about Frank Mir and Andrei Arlovski. The co-main event, the resurgence of both guys has been kind of amazing, especially the heavyweight division, because heavyweights tend to fall apart a lot quicker than the other weight classes. When you fall downhill, you tend to continue down the hill. Well, Mir and Arlovski both have come back. Obviously, we know that the long story of Frank Mir with his motorcycle accident and being the former heavyweight champion, coming his way back up and fighting his way through. It's almost the same story that Andrei Arlovski has, minus the motorcycle accident, where both guys were former heavyweight champs, were kind of the best guys at the time in their heyday. They're the best guys around. Now all of a sudden they're beating, a lot of really, really good younger guys and putting themselves back at the top of the heap. Is this fight really a fight to be at the top of the heap of the heavyweight division, or is this a fight more for the old school fans like myself and you who are like, wow, this is like, let's see these guys fight. This fight could have happened, 10, 15 years ago. It would have been amazing, but it's going to be just as good now.
Yeah, you know what is crazy, right? It could be like you said 10, 15 years ago, this could be the number one heavyweight in the world type of matchup, definitely for the championship. I mean, both these guys have been around for so long, and it's amazing really with the resurgence that both of them have had. And it is relevant because the winner of this fight definitely throws himself back in line for the title shot. I mean, Arlovski was right there with Stipe before this fight. I mean, it was going to be between him and Stipe. They obviously gave the fight to Kane again, which you can't even really argue that either, but he's right up there. So if Arlovski wins, he's going to be in line for a title shot. If Mir pulls off the upset, he just took that slot. So yes, this is a very important fight. It's a meaningful fight, and at the same time, it has that kind of classic throwback feel as well.
So you just said that if Mir pulls off the upset, it could be as well. So is Mir the underdog in this one?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely competitive. It's minus 150 right now for Arlovski. Mir's at plus 130, so it's a very competitive line. It should be a very competitive fight because both these guys can definitely end your night early with one punch.
Those numbers seem really, seem kind of low for this quality of fight. Is it, where should we be laying our money on right now?
Well, to me, I favor Mir a little bit if he comes in and fights the way he has been fighting. Now, again, you can't take anything away from Arlovski because he's looked great as well. Both of them have been challenged lately and have come through with flying colors, so they've looked great. But I just think, for me, looking at Mir recently, he's lost a little bit of that fear. Not that he's ever scared to go in there against anybody. I mean, he's obviously a warrior and he has been for a long time. But when he fought the higher level competition at times he did have that kind of quit in him, in my opinion. Now I think he's going out there fearless. I mean, he's got a lot of power on the feet. He's more known for his well-rounded skill set, but his ground game mainly, right? That's what usually we talk about with Frank Mir. But his striking is becoming a big factor here, and he's got power. And Arlovski's had a suspect chin. He's had it for a while. It's been holding up, so you got to give him credit. But if Mir lands, he could definitely put him out. Now, that being said, I realize that Arlovski is a heck of a striker as well. He's a well-rounded fighter. You could say a lot of the same things I just said about Mir with Arlovski, and Mir's also had a suspect chin throughout his career. So that's what the intriguing part is here. I think it's kind of a coin flip fight, and you got to kind of sway with the dog because I think the dog does have a little bit of value if either guy can knock each other out, if he has a route to a path to victory, and he does here. So I do think there's some value in Frank Mir.
Can we still say that Andre has a suspect chin after we watched how tough he went with Travis Brown? He got knocked down at least 3 times. He got knocked down once, but got hit hard enough to be put out 3 times and still comes back and wins the fight. Is it possible to come back from being, he gets, having a glass chin, to all of a sudden being totally back in the game? Or is it or was it just the luck of the draw that those punches weren't flush?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's a little bit of that as well. I mean, it's hard to imagine that his chin all of a sudden has recovered and he's, got more of a granite chin. It's just, you got to give him credit. I mean, not being put out like you did, like his recovery, it definitely, if you're supporting Arlovski, that gives you a little bit more confidence. But I don't buy it quite yet. I think that he's still, a little bit suspect, vulnerable there for sure. I don't think it gets better with time. I mean, obviously, if you're in great shape and your cardio is right there, everything lines up for you, health wise, body wise, physically. Yes, your chin's probably going to be a little bit better. So Orlovsky's been coming in tremendous shape. And if he's always been in pretty decent shape though, so I don't think that has a huge impact. But no, I still think that, in my opinion at least, that fear of him getting knocked out and his chin being a little bit softer is still there.
I think Frank Mir's going to come in and hit Arlovski a lot. He's going to hit him hard enough to make Arlovski have to open up to hit back. Right now Arlovski's the kind of fighter that he's going to try and win every round. He's very tactical. He's very smart. So once he starts getting hit a lot, whether he's actually losing the round or not, he will believe that he's losing the round and will start to open up, and that's when Mir's going to be able to hit him. And Mir's just one of those guys that especially at the heavyweight division, when you hit somebody, that lasting effect that you hit him with in the first round comes in the third round. I still question Frank Mir's cardio. That's one of the biggest things I have for him. He's always been a guy that's had a problem with the cardio, but he seems to be training a lot harder with Ricky Lindell. He seems to be putting more time in there. And of course, Arlovski no one's ever questioned his cardio. The only thing we've ever questioned is his chin. For me, the straight pick has got to be Andre Arlovski, but for my bet pick, 100%, if I'm putting any money now, it's got to be with Frank Mir. I'm only going to bet a small amount of money on this fight. Is this a small bet fight or is this a large bet fight?
It all depends on what exact price you get, and of course your bankroll management, all that as well. So, but a small stab at Frank Mir is not necessarily a bad thing. Although I agree with you, you're right. Arlovski should be favored in this fight. I think he's got the speed advantage. He's, I think, the more athletic fighter as well. I mean, you can't take much away from Mir in that aspect either. But still, so there is some advantages with Arlovski in this fight, and as you said, cardio wise, I mean, Mir will fade in this fight, and as a fight lasts, if it does tend to get out of round one and we get in round two and round three, then you would think Arlovski has the advantages there. So yes, Arlovski should be the slight favorite in this fight, but I agree with you. A small stab on Mir might not be a bad thing.
Okay, let's move on to the main event. This one I've been looking forward to for a while. Once they made the announcement, this is amazing. Like you said before, the toughest opponent so far that we've seen, Demetrius Johnson. A very, very close fight the first time. Will this fight go kind of the same way, or will it be worse for Dotson, or will it be better for Dotson this time?
Well, I mean, Dodson obviously is extremely dangerous. He is one of the best at flyweight, no doubt about it. And like you said, he gave Demetrius Johnson his toughest test to date thus far. I don't think the fight's going to be as close. It'll be competitive. I mean, in this weight class, and as skilled as these guys are at the top of the food chain there, I mean, it's going to be competitive. These guys are going to be close. Every round's going to be close. But I do think that Demetrius Johnson will win a little bit more clear. I don't think we're going to see the close split decision type of fight that we seen last time. Now, of course, Dotson is going to be coming in with a lot of power, and he did do some damage last time. He rocked Demetrius Johnson, of course. So there's that knockout chance always there with Dotson because he's so explosive, he's so powerful. But I think overall, if you look at the fight a little bit closer, Demetrius Johnson really had advantages in almost every area across the board. And I think those advantages actually have only improved because I think since their last meeting, if you look at their fights, Dotson, he's looked pretty good overall, but I think Demetrius Johnson has looked even better. So really, I think Demetrius Johnson's at the top of his game.
I have kind of one of those outside sources factors I like to throw in here at this one. Let me know if it's going to affect the fight or not. I stalk the UFC and all their social networks. I stalk Dodson and Demetrius Johnson on all their social networks. So I can see when they're out doing a media tour or what have you. Dodson has not been on this kind of extensive media tour for this kind of fight ever in his career beforehand. There's a lot of times where the UFC or Dotson was posting, he's up again at this early hour, he's in this place again, another city in another time zone. And it always seemed to be like super, super early and not much sleep for Dotson. And so you have to do a part of this when you want to be in a championship fight, is doing these press tours and being around the media and doing these extra things. When you're number two contender, number three contender, it doesn't really happen that much. I think the press tour now for the championship fights, because of how big the sport has become, that it's going to affect the number one contender if they haven't been in it before. And I think now Dotson is going to be affected by this highly, which is going to make the gap that I thought was a little bit more in DJ's favor is now even a bigger gap because DJ is used to doing this press tour. He's used to having these things. When I call him down his schedule for interviews, it's very easy to get on his schedule, but it's a very set time. He will not do it after a certain time at night. He will not do it on certain days of the week. He won't do it before a certain time in the morning. He's very scheduled. It's just how he operates. Dotson, I'm not so sure. I think this media tour is really going to affect him and affect the way the fight goes. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, it could definitely have an impact. I mean, mentally is a big part of the game. Like you said, maybe not keeping in your comfort zone by getting up a little bit earlier. Like you said, a lot of that stuff, it can't be good for Dotson. Of course, we also got to factor in that he's recently had a child as well. So, I mean, less sleep, you know how that goes as well. There are a lot of factors coming in that are not really working for Dotson, but he could also use a lot of that stuff as motivation. Sometimes there's fighters, I think, out there that the busier they are, the more hectic their lives are, they perform better. So it really all depends on, I think, the individual. I mean, because some people deal with that stress and all the craziness better, and it kind of shows in their performance. Other people, and in most cases, I think, will actually have a negative impact on them. So hopefully, Dotson's not one of those guys. I want to see an awesome fight again. I'm sure we will. Honestly, I'm expecting a very competitive, close fight, but I do think it's Demetrius Johnson's fight to win or lose. I mean, that's why he's coming in as such a big favorite this time, even more so than their last fight, even if it was competitive.
My straight pick, obviously, is DJ. And unfortunately, in the back of my head, it keeps telling me my bet needs to be DJ as well, even though the number's so inflated, which means for me, I'm going to have to leave this one alone because there's no real value in me betting on bidding on DJ. Is this kind of where you're leaning towards as well?
Yeah, I mean he's minus 600 right now, so it's tough. I mean, in Dotson at plus 450, you're not going to see that line against anybody else right now in the flyweight division. So he's only going to be that big of an underdog to a guy like Demetrius Johnson. So if anything, maybe the line's getting a tad bit high, and we're disrespecting Dodson a little bit. But that being said, I still think it's hard to bet against Demetrius Johnson right now. I mean, really is. The guy is just, like I said, top of the food chain. To me, he's one of the best pound for pound fighters out there. And if he doesn't get knocked out, he's just going to win the fight. So it is probably a favorite or pass situation. I think it hits a scorecard, so maybe a prop with DJ by decision, which still isn't going to be that great, but I think that's a little bit more logical, something like that. So, or if you want to take a small stab at some other props, if you do like Dotson by knockout, is reasonable as well. You're going to get a decent price on that prop. So stuff like that. But yeah, overall, yeah, it's definitely DJ or pass.
Looks like we agree this time. It's been a rarity as of the last couple of weeks. We've kind of been, a little bit on the opposite side of the coin in some of these fights. But man, the lines have been incredible and the picks have been great coming from your side. Mine have been a little bit suspect on my picks, but it's been so tough with the UFC and the way they're matchmaking as of late. And another great card coming up. Here I just don't know how many more great cards UFC is going to have coming through. It seems like the injury bug has not been happening at all. It seems like every card they put together seems to work well. If they do get an injury, the sadness of that great fight is no longer. They just take a fight that's supposed to happen 2 or 3 months later, and like, hey, do you guys want to move forward a little bit? And and then the main event moves, and they have another main event that matches it back, again. So we've seen a lot of shifting, but it's been great cards, and it's another one where if you have a shot to watch this fight, starts 7 p.m. Eastern on UFC Fight Pass, then goes on at Fox Sports 1 at 8 p.m. Eastern on Saturday night. Everybody's going to be tuning in. It's back again. I think we're getting back in the era again where people are starting to make fights an event at the house. Now, for you, fights are always an event. You're watching, you're online, you're updating, because you have to update the lines as the fights get closer. It becomes a whole problem. But do you feel like the UFC fights are becoming events again, like it used to be in about 3 or 4 years ago?
I think so. I mean, it's starting to feel that way, and especially with the stacked lineup they have in December for us. I mean, a lot of fans already are anticipating, the cards that are coming up because there's just so many great fights they're putting together towards the end of the year. So that buzz, that feel, they're doing a good job. I mean, the UFC is really truly a machine when it comes to marketing, when it comes to, promotions overall across the board. So yes, they get you kind of fired up and anticipating these fights for a while, and that's good because you want to have something to look forward to. I mean, as far as star power, some huge fights coming up, and in between from now until the end of the year, of course, we're going to have some good fights as well. So yeah, I think they're kind of building up everything up properly, and we're going to end the year off, I mean, tremendously with a lot of great fights. So I do think that. I think a lot of more people are going to be sitting around, you know what I mean, gathering together a little bit more and watching the fights. Yeah, it's definitely more an event now.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Nick, for coming on here again for the MMA Oddsbreaker Fight Breakdown Show. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, guys. Enjoy the fights. We'll see you next week.